welcome to the Momversation Club, the podcast born out of the idea that every mum needs a tribe. I'm Claire Strong.
And I'm Christina Struckmeyer. We're two moms just like you, navigating the chaotic, challenging, and often isolating world of motherhood.
It's said that it takes a village to raise a child, but we want to know, where the F is that village?
It's a question that resonates with so many of us who find ourselves raising children, managing careers, and trying to maintain our own identities, often with a sense of isolation.
Yeah, now raising children can be really isolating, but we're here to remind you that you're not alone. The Momversation Club is your village, a place where you feel supported, understood, and valued.
We believe that by sharing our own experiences, successes, and struggles, we can create a virtual village for all you amazing mamas out there.
So join us every week for a real, raw, and relatable discussion about all aspects of motherhood, including the things you just can't talk about with anyone else.
So if you've ever asked yourself where the F is the village, then you found your tribe. So let's get into it.
Well, I am so excited today because we have a wonderful guest, Paula Wroble. Hi, Paula.
Hi, ladies. How are you?
I am great. How are you doing?
All good. All good. The sun is out here shining for once in Chicago area. So
yay!
Yeah,
well,
finally.
I'm pleased to hear it. So spring is in the air. Well, listen, Paula, let's talk a little bit about why you're on the show today and what it is that you do. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So my son now is almost 20, which is totally crazy. I know we met so long ago, but basically when I had him, I had femoral and peroneal nerve damage from childbirth, which is very rare occurrence. Couldn't find anyone to connect with. So originally I'd made a post on Yahoo Groups, which was a thing back in the day. Now that's gone.
Throwback.
And super. That was my age for sure. But I had met maybe one or two, ladies on there eventually because I was telling them kind of what happened. I couldn't walk after I had my son and really just, panic mode, freaking out. So I made a post on there, didn't get any responses for a couple weeks or whatnot. And then slowly but surely, like one would trickle in, and kind of realized that it was, an issue that we couldn't find anything about online or anything. So we were just kind of grasping at straws. Eventually that group just kind of grew each month, maybe just one or two members. And then we switched over to the Facebook group. And now the Facebook group was started 13 years ago. I had my son almost 20 years ago, but we did it on Yahoo Groups first. And then I was like, Facebook became a thing, which is also making me sound real old, but, it's like crazy. So now there's 2,300 women in their group.
Wow.
Just kind of all in the same boat looking for answers. They're all across different, all across the world, which is just crazy. Very kind of like grassroots movement type thing. It's just started out with a Facebook group, but now it's the place to be for, women and families that have dealing with this nerve injury after they have a baby. So to give you an idea.
Okay, so what we're talking about here, just for our listeners at home, so we're talking about nerve damage as a result of childbirth. So that is essentially what this topic today that we're going to discuss is, and this is why your support groups exist. Just before we get into a few facts and figures, so one of the reasons I wanted you on the show today is because I have personally experienced nerve damage. I have a foot drop, which has never gone away. For anyone who's not familiar with that, it's basically I'm unable to flex my foot, essentially, and that can cause tripping hazards. And now I've had a lot of muscle loss due to the nerve damage. So unfortunately, I'm one of the long-term casualties. A lot of people do manage to make somewhat of a recovery, if not 100%. And we'll talk about your situation, Paula, in a little while. So that's why we're focusing today on this issue, because it's something that I personally feel a need to talk about, and I want to share my story. So why don't I just explain a little bit about what happened to me, and then we can chat about you and how it's affecting, like you say, women all over the world. So Okay, so I went into labor with my first child. I think it's important to mention this as well, because when you're a first time mum, you are totally at the perils of the midwife and the medical staff around you. You know, you really don't know very much. You haven't been through that before.
For
And so,
sure.
yeah, so I went in wanting as natural a labor as possible. I was trying not to have pain relief. I wanted a water birth. And all of those things. And so because of that, I started to get really fatigued, because unbeknown to me, I was also I was throwing up, basically, to put it bluntly. I was throwing up during labor, and I didn't expect that to be the case. And so I'd gone into my labor totally prepared, really healthy, really fit. I was a ex-ballet dancer. And so I was, oh, I've got this, I can do this, as natural as possible. And then by the time I was in the birthing pool, ready to deliver my daughter, I'd become so fatigued that it became dangerous, and the baby's heartbeat was dropping rapidly. Long story short, they had to get me out of the pool and try and get me to deliver. But I was so far into the delivery process that I couldn't have an epidural. And so we were almost at the point where we were going to have to go and have an emergency C-section, but I had no pain relief and they couldn't give me an epidural. So they were desperately trying to get this baby out without having to go into the operating room. And because of that, they brought out stirrups. So stirrups are those things where you have your feet in one, both feet in the stirrups. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, At the end of the table, typically they pull them up and you're pushing against it. Yeah.
Exactly. So the problem with that is there is so much force going through your knee area that it can result in nerve damage. And that's exactly what happened to me. So I delivered my baby using stirrups. I got off the bed and I just collapsed. It was as if I'd had a stroke from my knee down on my right side. And the staff didn't know what the hell had gone on. And I had lots of scans and it was all quite, concerning. And so fast forward a few days, I went to see a specialist and he said, "How did you deliver the baby?" And I told him, and he said, "They shouldn't be using stirrups. They're extremely dangerous. This is a possible, side effect of using them." And in his opinion, it was like an archaic practice that needed to stop because of the potential risk to the mum. So anyhow, that has left me with permanent nerve damage. I do Pilates every day. I try and keep really active, but as time has gone on, because I have never fully healed, that side of my leg is weaker and weaker, and to the point where I have to wear an AFO, which for anyone that doesn't know what I'm talking about, I should have brought it on the show to show you. But it's basically I don't know how to describe it. It's a piece of kit really that straps to my leg, and I put it inside a shoe. And so when I'm out walking or doing anything that's active, I'm not going to trip because it holds my right foot, which is really weak, in place. So it's preventing me from tripping, basically. So that's my story. And until this happened to me, I had never, ever heard of this. I mean, Paula, I don't know about you, because I want you to explain your story to us too. But, when you, especially as a first-time mom, you do hear about some horrors of childbirth, but it's not this. It's, it's other stuff. And when I realized what had happened to me, I was like, my God, like, why didn't I know about this? Why wasn't I told about this? And I just felt so vulnerable and so, just very vulnerable and totally at the whims of all the medical staff around me, which kind of, they failed me. I'll put it bluntly. I felt totally failed. And so tell me about you, Paula. Just share a little bit about your situation.
Yeah. So my story, I went into labor, didn't seem, anything too crazy. I actually, for being a first time mom, I was surprised. I did get an epidural. I only ended up pushing for about not even an hour, which,
that's great.
Was interesting.
For a first time mom.
It is. Yeah, especially, but I had so much damage. I can't even imagine what would have happened if I had to push for way longer. I mean, I was in labor. I went in the night before and I was in labor for a while, but as far as the pushing, it was only 45 minutes. So I went into labor. Also stirrups. Also,
Wow.
a big part of it was, I just wanted him out. So I was like, they had me, my husband was on one side and the nurse was on the other side, and we were pulling, the knees back, kind of like the
Yeah.
frog, so I was in the stirrups, but also doing that. And there was a lot of pressure behind my knees. And I didn't really move around a lot. And the nurse didn't tell me to move around not a lot. And I was just like thinking that position was going to make things move along quicker. I was just like, let's just go, I'll sit in this position all day and just get this baby out. And, thinking that was helping. And it was actually doing the exact opposite. It was harming the mother. But so he came out. Everything was fine with that. Same type of thing though. I was like, my epidural is like not wearing off. Because I did have the epidural. I'm like, it's not wearing off. It's weird. I feel like it's, pins and needles and stuff. And she was like, the nurse came in and was like, oh, it'll probably takes a little longer for some people. I was like, all right, and I could see the nurses getting a little anxious. Like, this is weird, but okay. Yeah. I'm trying not to panic,
Yeah.
and she was trying not to panic. And she had me do some things like, can you move your leg this way? Can you move your leg this way? It was like, okay, I could strangely move my legs like side to side, but I couldn't kick them up. And just like certain things were weird. So she's like, let's not try and get you out of bed yet. We'll just wait and see if this wears off. So the following day, they went to get me out of bed. And I was like, I don't know. Like, they still feel like weird. At that point I still had the catheter and everything, so I didn't really have to get up. And I was like, that feels weird. But same exact thing. The nurse, I like stood up for a second and she grabbed my arm and boom, like right knees buckled, hip, and then you just had a baby, so you have stitches and all sorts of things. Same exact thing. And they're like, okay, you see like the look of terror, in the nurse's face and stuff.
You do. Yeah, and I had the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is crazy. That everyone's got a lot of the same story. Yeah, so pick me up in bed and then they're just trying to figure out. Same thing, kind of gotten all the scans. They had thought a lot of the things that the nerve damage gets confused with is epidural, like injuries from the epidural. So they did a scan to make sure they didn't basically nick my spine with the epidural. So they did some sort of scan to check for like a hemorrhage or blood clot or something. That was fine. They're like, okay. And we're just kind of like, I don't know. And I remember my doctor came in. She was very nonchalant about it too. She was just like, oh, this happens sometimes. You'll be fine in a couple of days. I was like, all right. In the meantime, they had me stay a couple days extra there, start physical therapy. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't know what. And they were just kind of doing whatever, They had me with the walker. I kept falling, which was scary in itself, after just having a baby too. And the neurologist I had was not good. And again, I know we can get in this too, Claire. We talk about this a lot, but he basically told my mom that he thought it was in my head. And it's crazy because, and my mom, she certainly gave him a piece of her mind at that point, but we're like, okay, time to find a new doctor. But it's crazy because I thought that was just kind of a one-off thing with me. But now having these almost 3,000 women in the group, so many women have been like, my doctor thinks I'm going crazy. My doctor said it's in my head. I'm like, this is nuts. Like, that's what it's so many people do that. But and I didn't figure out I went home. I had a physical therapist come to the house and she was like, well, I guess we have to get you used to your new way of life. And I was like, oh, no, this is not my new way of life. I said, this is just temporary. No one knows what's going on yet. So flipped out, of course, for that reason too. And then finally 2 weeks later, I'd gotten in with Chicago Institute of Neurology and Neuroscience, which is more specialized team. And I happened to just have a doctor got in there with a woman that actually knew what she was talking about. Like right when I came in, she happened to do a study like years ago and even had one other woman she had worked with years in the past. But that 2 week time frame, I'm sure like I thought I was paralyzed. Like I had to live downstairs. I couldn't do stairs. I couldn't even get into my house. Nonetheless, carry the baby, anything like that. We kind of set up shop downstairs with the crib and everything, because if I wanted to go upstairs, I have to crawl up the stairs. And But yeah, so everyone kind of has the same version of this story, just a little different. But yeah,
Oh my gosh, you guys. Well, I'm coming into this as an outsider. I've never heard of this ever, which is crazy because, like Claire said, we should, as women going into this, know that that's a possibility, that's happened before. But something you said earlier is the notion that things are in your head, the priority of baby during labor, and then maybe not so much the priority of how mom's feeling and what's going on with mom.
yeah,
I would love for us to kind of have a little chat about that because I think that's not unique to this specific situation. I think that's more of a general when in labor type situation for most women, that your pain levels, your the way that you're feeling about certain things, maybe having conversations with the doctor about wants and needs. Sometimes those things in the moment don't get that pause, don't get that reflection. What say ye? Have you guys had that experience with doctors when you're in labor? I mean, I don't know, Paula, do you have any other children? Have you gone through labor again? Like, what's been your experience?
yeah. I did have. I can't even believe I actually decided to do this again. But it is true that thing must you kind of forget about it, I guess, because
Yeah.
I can't. That was like my proudest accomplishment. I feel like actually having courage to do it again. But I will say.
Yeah.
I switched doctors, so that helps. I switched hospitals. Um, Once obviously they knew the story, the new doctors don't want anything to do with it either. They're very nervous about it. So they did listen to me the second time. I actually had a C-section also. I just wanted a whole different labor experience. Mentally, I know a lot of women will have it naturally again. It's probably 50-50. I would say some do C-section, some do it naturally, personal preference wise. But they did say the chances of it like happening again are like getting struck by lightning 2 times. But for me, I just want to do the C-section. So the second time around was a lot better, but only because I was equipped with the knowledge and kind of told them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to
Mhm.
because you mentioned the trauma of that and how that would inform any later decisions that you might have with future children. I mean, um, does that come up in the group a lot? Has that happened where people go on to maybe think about having another child and have this as a consideration, like the trauma of what has happened be in that
Oh yeah.
decision?
I would say that's probably one of the biggest, besides, the ladies just finding us and figuring out like, oh, am I going to be, am I going to recover from this, or getting all the details and connecting with other women? That I would say is like one of the big topics is having another baby. For sure. Cause to me, it was all a mental game. It was a mental game. I knew like logically probably wouldn't happen again, but so when I had my C-section, I was in the bathroom and they were like, Paula, it's time to go. And I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. My husband's like, you have to
Oh.
come out of the bathroom.
I've decided to stay pregnant. No, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I can vouch for that, Paula. So I went on and had another child, and I had a natural labor again. And I've got to say, that was the one thing that terrified me, because you're right. You have PTSD when you have a bad labor, a bad delivery. Not just nerve damage. We're discussing that today, but like you said, Christina, labor can be traumatic for many different reasons. And I think when you've had a traumatic labor, regardless of what the situation was, I think that, that can color your decision to either have another child, or if you are going to do that again, it colors your decision as to how you want that labor to be. For me, like you, Paula, I was told that the chances of this reoccurring were extremely rare. I felt that I was equipped with more knowledge the second time around. So I actually put in my birthing plan, they were not to use stirrups under any circumstances. I made them very aware of what had happened in my previous delivery. And so I did deliver my second child with no repeat damage, which was great. But, I think, honestly, Christina, to the point you were making earlier, I think women are extremely vulnerable. I think we are at our most vulnerable in lots of ways when we're in the delivery room, because we're quite often in a lot of pain. There's a lot of moving parts. And so we do rely on the people around us who are experts, supposedly, to do the best by us. But it's still, giving birth is still a dangerous game for many different reasons, and it
Yeah.
shouldn't be like that. And I can't help but think a lot of the decisions as well, I think it's still a male dominated industry. I think a lot of the procedures, a lot of the people in charge are still guys, and I don't know how, if you haven't been through labor yourself, you can be quite the expert in the field. I mean, that's just
Yep.
my personal observation. But, the doctor who was going to do a C-section on me the first time around, but realized I'd not had an epidural and it was, going to be kind of horrific, was the one to get the stirrups out. And I'm not saying that a woman doctor would have made a different decision, but I can't help but feel that still a lot of the people in charge are guys.
I don't know if it's a woman male thing as much as it's like I mentioned earlier, like the priority on getting that baby out safely at the detriment of what might occur with the woman. There are two people in this situation.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to check in with you. There's a lot of times I've heard women talk about, for instance, the decision to go into a C-section and how hasty that is, and how, there's not that pause sometimes of just being like, hey, we're coming up against a wall here and here's your options. What do you want as the person birthing? And they don't listen. Like even with small stuff, I know in my own labor with my second, I said, hey, I'm feeling pressure. Like I need to push. And it was like, we just checked you. You're not in that space. And I'm like, well, tell that to my body, which is feeling the thing that I know what it is. And lo and behold, like 20 minutes later, I had a baby in my arms, these types of situations, like I can't feel this. I'm feeling like this. I can't walk. Like, I think if we just stopped and listened to women, it's their bodies. We've been doing this for centuries. We kind of know a thing or two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for you two ladies, because you're both American and obviously I'm from across the pond. But certainly in the UK, there's a real push on having a natural labor. If you go in and say, I want an epidural, you are dissuaded enormously from doing that. They want you to have as little pain relief as possible. They'd love you to use a birthing pool. I don't know whether the midwives in the UK get bonuses on this type of thing. I don't know. But it's certainly, when I walked in there saying I wanted a natural labor, I was, an A-star student for them. They were like, oh, this is marvelous. This is going to look great on my record. And it went terribly wrong. So I just wonder, here, is there, are you kind of pressured almost into doing as much of it yourself and not relying on pain relief? I don't know. Is it different here?
I don't know. I feel like it's very depends on who your doctor is. I feel like, because I have friends that are like, oh no, I didn't do any of that, and I think it's more maybe practice based. Depending on who gives out who wants the drugs and who doesn't. That's what I think. I don't remember being really swayed either way. I don't know. How about you?
Well, for me, I was the opposite of you, Claire. I was like, as much drugs as possible, like, is the legal limit of drugs, please.
I wish I'd have done that with hindsight. Hindsight's a beautiful thing.
So, I expressed that from the very beginning, and I had a unique situation with both my girls were inductions, so it was going to be like a longer situation, and there would be Pitocin involved, which increases the intensity of the contractions, and so. Yeah, I mean, my doctor was on board, and I was very adamant from every stage, every single person I saw. I mean, I joked that I saw a janitor, and I was like, "Excuse me, ma'am, like the board says epidural as soon as possible, please." Because I was terrified that someone would forget me, or I'd get last in line, and we would miss that point of being able to have it, like you had said.
Yes.
I think that most Western doctors are kind of like, "What do you want?" And I don't know about you guys, but I felt very heard from my doctor that I chose, from the entirety of the process of being pregnant. But then I felt like once I was in labor, it was like I'm taking a back seat to whatever needs to happen medically. I didn't feel checked in with as much. Even in my induction, it depended on what nurse was tending to me as to whether I felt like a person or like a birthing machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. It's still it still feels like the Wild West when it comes to birth. There are so many variables. I do agree with your point that I don't think women are listened to. And I tell you who I think are the most vulnerable people, first-time mums, because it's assumed that, you don't know what you're doing. I've done this job for 20 years and I know exactly this is, like you, Christina, they're kind of second guessing how it is that you're feeling. So that can't be right. But Paula, going back to the support group and the women that, you guys help support, how is it impacting them? I want to know how it's impacting them emotionally as well, because these people really open up to you on that group. I'm actually a member, so I see some of the comments. Talk to me about some of that. How is it really impacting women?
Yeah, I think we all have different, you know, lives coming from all across the world in that group, but the same type of thing. Obviously it's physically challenging, clearly. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes weeks, so you don't really know if you're going to get better or not. Obviously, but the mental game is probably the worst. For me, I would say, the biggest thing I think all the women would say is you just feel like kind of a sense of loss for, not being able to care for the baby. I was a first time mom. I didn't know what I was doing anyway. And then to have this, my mom, I remember the nurses were kind of saying, my doctor that I found in the city that helped me a lot. They were, kind of telling my husband and my mom to have me do as much as I could for my mental state. She's like, so my mom would grab the baby, bring him over so I could change him, instead of like her just changing him. My husband would, we'd set up my room at night when I was bottle feeding at the time. So, so he would set up everything, go get the bottle. And like, I would still get up and feed the baby, but a lot of the women too, I think they just kind of feel robbed from that first. I remember, I had a lot of friends having babies at the same time, and, they were all great. They had good labors and nothing happened to them. I was like in this depression, because I just wanted to go for a walk outside and I was trapped in this house. I couldn't drive, couldn't do any of the things that I wanted to do, so it really affects you and your family too, I mean, my husband he worked from home at the time and my mom was around at the time. So they helped me a lot with that. But, so of course the physical challenges, but the really played a part on your mental health also. I was just super paranoid, would have nightmares about like having a fire and not being able to get out of the house in time with the baby, and things like that. So, and just really, and then I don't know about you, Claire, but I had zero improvements until about 3 months. So that was, even though the doctor told me that I'd get better, it still was like, all these things go through your head, and, you had to use a walker. I used a walker. I could have even used a wheelchair, but I used a walker around the house. And then, just really adjusting, just a big adjustment to the first time moms. And then there's different issues if it happened to a second time mom, then you're trying to chase after your toddler or whatnot and trying to take care of your newborn and you can't really do either. So I imagine not one scenario is better than the other, but if the physical challenges, the mental challenges, everything.
Well, and that's on top of the normal postpartum stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, people don't talk about that as much, but like you're really in a space of like mobility already being challenged without that nerve injury of like, you're still bleeding for quite a while and if you had stitches or if you had any tears and you're trying to figure out breastfeeding and then your hormones are taking a huge dive. People all experience baby blues. So it's a recipe, it sounds like, for quite a bit of mental health issues when you add in that severe mobility issue with a nerve damage injury. I mean, Claire, yeah, you speak to that as well. Like you had that experience too. Did you have improvements sooner? She had mentioned 3 months. Like, what did yours look like?
Yeah, I mean, so at the time, I was like Paula, I was unable to do anything. And I think going back to what you just said, Paula, you feel very robbed of this whole experience that you assumed you were going to have, because the day you went into labor, everything was fine. And then you leave the hospital and you cannot do anything for yourself. So I couldn't go up the stairs like you, couldn't carry the baby. Couldn't do anything. I had to walk outside I had one of those big, it wasn't a cast on my leg, but it was one of those huge leg braces. And so the first photo I have of me pushing my baby outside is with me with this huge leg brace on. And it just wasn't what I was expected. I did everything I thought I should have done. And yet I came out of hospital, in my case, permanently injured. So yeah, like Paula, I would say around the 6-week mark, I was getting quite a bit of my mobility back on my right side. I would still fall sometimes though. Falling's the worst, Paula. I don't know whether you agree with this, but I to this day have nightmares about falling. Sometimes I'm about to fall asleep and then I have this nightmare about tripping. And I'm like, oh my God. And like it jolts me upright. So yeah, falling's the worst. That is the worst thing. From my experience, that's the worst part of this nerve damage thing. So I would say pretty much by the 6-month mark, I was pretty well healed. But unfortunately for me, as time's gone by, that injury's just kind of got weaker. And so I'm actually I'm almost back to square one to some extent with my injury, which is very frustrating.
Yeah. Claire, so you guys both mentioned stirrups. And so is that pretty much the main commonality as far as like what we could pinpoint was the reason for most of the people in the group? Or is there other ways that people are sharing that they also incurred a nerve injury that doesn't involve stirrups?
The stirrups are a thing for sure. But just in general, they say the positioning, during labor, like the lithotomy position and your legs, they say like shouldn't be flexed past 30 degrees, I think it is. So mostly it's a positioning. They do say like women that have had previous, back surgeries or sciatic nerves or large babies, that could be a contributing factor. For me, my doctor had told me it's because I'm petite. And they said also kind of happens more often with first time moms than, second, third, fourth, or whatever time moms. But I would say the main thing is the positioning. You're really supposed to move. Obviously, I'm not a medical expert, but you're really supposed to move between like 10 to 15 minutes, switch positions. And I know for me, I was just bearing down in that position for nearly an hour, on the same position. And, having the nurse and just pulling back on my legs. And then I think, just being in that position and have the pressure back behind the knees, that caused, because there's femoral, which is basically the quad muscles. And then there's peroneal, which is the foot drop, which I had that also. So I had it in both legs. I had foot drop on both feet and the femoral damage on both legs too. My right was worse than my left, I believe. But yeah, so positioning is the main factor.
Sounds like it. You know what's interesting, guys, is as a first time mom and second, like I had a big gap between the kids. I did birthing classes, and I remember we did so much preparation for like meditation and like massage from the partner and all this stuff. We didn't practice positioning for labor. And and my second pregnancy, I had a pelvic floor injury from my first child. And so I went to a pelvic floor therapist for the second one, just to kind of prepare and make sure I didn't make it worse. And we practiced positions. She was like, if you have an epidural, which is your plan, here are a few things you can do. And with my partner, she like, okay, put your leg here, put your leg there. And we did these like practice birthing positions that I was able to use in labor. but I've never received that information at any other doctors or midwife appointments. Do you think that if we practice those positions, that this might be less like common? Like, is that something that you guys think would be preventative?
I do. I just feel like,
Yeah.
even all's, who knows what would have happened, because I mean, I was first time mom. My baby was not big, but I'm petite and all sorts of things. And who knows what else is going on inside your body that could,
Of course.
add to this. But I feel like if they would have just told me, hey, move around every 10, 15 minutes, let's switch, let's switch, let's switch. That's all they had to say. Or,
Mhm.
and chances are these nurses probably didn't even know either about,
Yes. Yeah.
and the way my doctor, she was just like, oh yeah, it sounds like a little nerve something, but like it didn't even really phase her. How to this day, I don't know if she knew how, you know, horrible it was because I switched doctors because I was just frustrated. Yeah, but I think simple, not saying it would end it all, but the positioning and just being moving around, being told to move around, being aware that you're sitting in the same position for so long. I do feel like that would have saved me a lot. Um, and yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Claire, and you went through another childbirth that was similar in experience as far as like it being a vaginal childbirth. Did you do any like lead up to try to not have this happen again outside of this the expectation of like it probably isn't going to, like Paula said, her doctor said it's like a strike of lightning or something. Did you do anything preventative to kind of lessen the chance of this happening?
So when I went into that birthing room, I explicitly said, no effing way are you going to, I said, I'm not going to get on a bed. So that's what I did. I did not set foot on a bed all the way through my delivery. So I was very scared about the bed because I thought the second I get on there, then I'm stuck in that same position and that may increase my chances of getting injured again. So I moved around the room. I was walking a lot. I used the ball. So I didn't want to be on a bed. So that was my way of advocating for myself. I was very, very blunt with them. I said, listen, I've had nerve damage from my previous childbirth. This is what caused it. So under no circumstances are we using stirrups, and I am moving around. I'm not going on a bed. I'm not going to be laid there for half an hour. That's not happening. So, and they didn't argue with me. They let me do what I planned to do. And I had no repeat damage, a great birth actually in the end. But that's because I was more confident the second time around and I was advocating for myself. And so I wasn't as in a vulnerable situation as I was the first time around because knowledge is power. And I knew what had caused my injury and I knew how to avoid it repeating. Paula, I was just interested because this Facebook group that you set up 13 or so years ago, how has it evolved over that time? So, what are moms still saying? Are they still complaining of the same medical practices? I mean, has anything improved over the 13 years that this Facebook group has been a thing?
People are finding the group and joining the group because they don't have any other knowledge on it. Um, so I would say as far as awareness, the group has kind of had this, again, this kind of grassroots movement thing where, I started the group, I founded the group, and it was just really a place for, women like myself to meet other women and get emotional support. But I will say from the group, there has been several women that have, we have a website now, nervedamagefromchildbirth.com. That's one of the women in the group made. We have our friend Martha, who Claire, we spoke to a couple years back as well. She does a lot, she kind of does this Micah month in the month of May to raise awareness. She's got like a Facebook group, Instagram, things like that. I think the group is just generally speaking, just bringing hope and encouragement. And I think people are finding us online easier. But as far as medical changes, or progress, I couldn't tell you, like nothing major. I know Martha has told me that, there is a team that have done studies about it, and they are published in the journals and things like that. So I do feel like it's getting out there a little more. But, as far as women coming in being like, oh, my doctor told me this could happen or anything, not once. And I'm not saying no one is doing that, but it's just crazy. Like, I mean, and still till this day, 20 years later, when I tell the story, literally no one, everyone's like, what?
Yeah.
I've heard of
Yeah, I get that reaction too. Yeah, no.
Well, we need to talk about it. That's one of the first steps, is just getting out there, and that's why I'm so happy Paula's on the show today. Because for many of our audience, this is going to be the first time they've ever heard anything like this. And then for those who have experienced it, not that you have to be like, wearing a sash that says I've experienced nerve damage from birth, but like, as you're having community with other women who are in a birthing stage, share what's going on with you. I think that's how, postpartum depression has gotten more and more well known these days, because women are not afraid to share what's going on with them. And that's how it's evolved into something a lot more people are looking for and being aware of. And now there's questionnaires as you're entering an OBGYN office. I don't know about you guys, but I had to sign like, are you feeling sad today? I'm like, I'm sad all the time. I'm pregnant.
Yeah, right.
I'm a mom. What do you think?
I'm miserable. But, it's out there more. There's a lot more advocacy for it. And so I think the first step is just talking and sharing and doing what we're doing right now.
Yeah, for sure.
And what you started 13 years ago on Facebook.
So listen, if someone is in the situation that we were in, and they've just given birth and there's something wrong, they've been injured and they have nerve damage, what help is out there for them, and what would your advice be?
Yeah, I would say, we've kind of came up with like a protocol just in general, where they should get an MRI of the spine, just to rule out anything else. And then physical therapy, preferably with someone that specializes in neuromuscular issues. And then an EMG if necessary to kind of pinpoint the nerve damage. But those are the kind of things we tell for the women that come on, like, I can't walk, what do I do? And generally speaking, that's kind of the protocol. We also have, our website now, which is Nerve Injury from Childbirth .com or something like that. We'll put in the notes later, but they can reference. There's like a printable brochure you can, take with and bring to your doctor. Once the ladies find the group, they can kind of go on the website and look at all the tools we have, and then which I think is great, since it's not super common in the medical community that doctors know about it. I mean, it actually is pretty common. Like 1 in 100 women, they usually say this happens to. A lot of the times, though, it gets a lot of the times it's brushed off as epidural related. So many times, and because some women do get it, taken care of or bounce back right away, they're just like, oh, see, it was the epidural, just wore off. Where really, I think a lot of times it was nerve damage, because I feel like I've met someone too, and they're like, oh, I had, the weird nerve thing, that epidural. My epidural lasted like a week. I couldn't walk, or my foot was dragging for a week. And I'm like,
wow.
Oh. You know what I mean? Like, that was not your, but they're going home thinking it was the epidural, and it really wasn't, I mean,
that point right there, like, for women, we had this traumatic situation of like exiting a human from our body, and they're like, see you in 6 weeks. Like, they don't check on you. They don't, like, especially if you're having like nerve injuries. It's crazy to me. My daughter got tooth surgery the other day, and they called me 3 times to make sure she was feeling okay, like within the next 2-3 days. We don't get anything as women. We're just expected to like figure that shit out. And to your point, like, this gal's like, well, I guess this is what's happening, because unless she calls the doctor and says like, hey, this is what's going on, what's happening, she's just going to go ahead and think that's normal. And the doctor if, especially like you said, if you're in the hospital with them and they're saying, hey, this is normal, it'll wear off, they have their answer. Like there's no reason to have a follow-up. It's just so crazy to me that, do you guys have any thoughts about that? About like the whole 6-week gap? Has that been something that you guys talk about in the group?
Yeah, like I never had any follow up, even from my doctor when, I had stayed there an extra day or two. And I remember I got wheeled out by this 85-year-old candy striper volunteer man. And he was like, "Oh, what happened to you, young lady?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." Like sent off in this wheelchair. No one, like they just kept me there an extra day or two. Nothing improved. Freaking out.
Yeah.
I go home and my doctor didn't even like follow. I'm sure there's some that might, but mine didn't even follow up with me. Be like, "Hey, could you walk yet, lady?" It's like no. And I remember going back there for my checkup, the 2-week checkup after, or whatnot. I'm in my walker, and I had a different doctor because mine was out of town or something, and he was like, "Oh, what happened to you here?" It's crazy. Yeah.
It's wild.
Well, listen to this one. I had a doctor say to me, because at the time I'd done a pretty good job of recovery, so I was able to walk pretty well at that point, although I could never flex my foot. And I went to a doctor just to kind of say to him, "Listen, this is what happened to me a couple of years ago. I still can't flex my foot. Obviously, this is an issue." And he said to me, he's like, "What would you like me to do? Chop your foot off?" And
no.
would you like me to chop your foot off? Because you can actually walk, so I don't know what the issue is here. And so
you are kidding me.
No.
That is crazy.
I was like, okay, so I, was paralyzed. I made a pretty good recovery, but I'm still having issues. And his suggestion was to just chop my foot off. I guess to stop me complaining, but who knows?
I can't even deal with that, Claire. It just goes back to what we said earlier in that doctors need to start listening to us and need to start allowing us to advocate, but they need to set the path where our voice matters so that we are able to advocate. And I would be remiss to not mention that, we are all women who are not of color. And for those who are of color, it's even worse, which is affecting the maternal rate and all that kind of stuff. So it's an issue upon issue upon issue of just not being listened to. And it's our bodies. And it's something that I think if men were the ones to go through childbirth, this shit would be so different.
Yeah.
Well, for a start, my husband would never stop recalling, the traumatic birth that he,
every day
15 years ago. And
right.
I say this to him. I say, my God, if you'd actually been through 2 childbirths and you'd had like one that was like mine, where I was like paralyzed, like everyone in the world, anyone that you spoke to every day of your life would hear it. Like you'd need so many medals and it would be just such a thing. But seriously, Christina, you make a great point. I actually wanted to speak to this at some point, and this is a perfect opportunity. So we're already vulnerable as women going into child labor. We are, especially as first-time mothers. But then you pile on the fact that women of color are far more likely to experience a negative childbirth and die in childbirth. Yeah. And if you think of all of those factors, it's just, you're kind of like rolling the dice. And what really bothers me is this country, so the US, is one of the most developed countries in the world, yet maternal mortality is extremely high here in comparison to other Western countries. And it's shocking. It's shocking that you can still, in the USA, go to deliver a child and you may not come out. And I don't want to freak everyone out that's listening to this. Of course, you're overwhelmingly going to have a safe labor and everything's going to be great, but things do happen. And Paula and I are here to tell you that things that you never even expect to happen can happen, like nerve damage. But there are obviously some much more serious outcomes that affect people, particularly women of color. And so it's not right, is it? It should not be happening in 2024.
But I'm so glad that you both are advocating for this and that our audience gets to hear this perspective, because I think it's going to be really important. And the best thing we can do as women going into a birth, or advising someone, maybe a friend or family member who's going into a birth, is to just be informed and be able to have that ability to advocate. And if you don't feel comfortable advocating, bring someone who will, find that friend or a doula or someone to come with you to that birth and advocate, because it's important. It's important that you be heard no matter what, and that your feelings are valid during this entire process, during pregnancy, during the birth itself, after as a mother, like, you matter. And so I love that you guys are bringing this to the forefront and that our audience gets to hear about it.
But what you just said, Christina, I don't know whether you agree, Paula, but that's a great suggestion. I mean, as a woman going through childbirth, in the heat of the moment, you may not be focusing on, other things. You just want to get this baby out. You want the pain to stop. You know how it is. And so if you can bring someone with you, whether that's your partner, whether it's your mom, whether it's a friend, anyone, and they are able to be your voice. So they also need to be educated and aware. But if they can be your voice, that's a huge help, because if I'd have had someone with me that would have known, no stirrups, for example, going into a delivery, I probably wouldn't be in this situation now. Who knows? But I think that's a great point, Christina. Have someone with you that can advocate for you at what can be a really vulnerable time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So next steps, like we said earlier, Paula's information and the way to access her community, the way to access her website is going to be in our show notes. And if you're someone who has been affected by nerve damage from a birth, or someone who has, please get these resources, because they are out there, they are available, and they're growing, it sounds like, day by day.
Yeah. And I've got to say, Paula, on a personal note, I've just benefited so much from the group, because I hadn't met one single person who had experienced nerve damage in childbirth like me, not one. I thought I was a freak. And then I discovered your group a few years back, and it's been a huge comfort to me. So, it's unfortunate this happened to us, but, let's be out there supporting other women, and you guys are doing such a great job. So thank you. You've helped me personally, Paula, so I appreciate you all.
Oh, good. I appreciate you girls too for allowing me to come on the platform. And we're just trying to spread, awareness any way we can ourselves. So thank you both.
And just before, no worries. And just before we wrap up, Paula, so May is MICA. Is that how we pronounce it? MICA Awareness Month. So just tell us, you did mention it earlier, but what actually is that? What does MICA stand for? And what's the aim of the Awareness Month?
Yeah, so it's Maternal Nerve Injury from Childbirth Awareness. It's in its 7th year, and we do it during the month of May. And every kind of year we focus on a different topic related to the injury. And this month I'm told that it is supposed to be pain management and managing emotional triggers from the nerve injury. So we do it a Facebook page, and they have an Instagram page. So.
Okay. Yeah. Great stuff. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Paula. It's such an important subject, and any awareness that we can, raise surrounding this issue, I think is fantastic. And, just highlighting the point about, women empowering themselves so that they're not in such a vulnerable position going into childbirth. Anything we can do for that, I think is great. So thank you so much, Paula.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, girls.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Momversation Club.
And if you've enjoyed today's show, which we hope you have, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach even more moms and build a stronger village.
Until next time. Bye.